Okay, guys, so I finally decided that with the number of questions I get over the months on Fortnite, as far as what settings I test with, I decided it's finally time to do an actual dedicated video of what settings that I use on Fortnite. Um, so these settings are pretty much the same every single system I test. The only time these settings are going to be different than this is when it is a video for the specific purpose of demonstrating something that's going to be using different settings. So, for example, this system that I'm on today is this is my personal machine. I don't do as many Fortnite videos with this because I test with so many computers. I'm usually using a system that I'm building to sell. Um, so this system can obviously run, obviously higher numbers, higher resolution, stuff like that. So if I were to do a video of this system running 4K, for example, some of this stuff would be changed. But for the systems that you actually see by and large being demoed, we're going to stick with these settings almost exclusively. The other reason for that is that with how old the channel is at this point, I think I've been doing this for, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years, something like that now. I want the videos to be consistent across that time period. It's a much more effective comparison tool. If all of the videos are at the same settings. It's also an interesting comparison to how the game has changed in system requirements and just optimization, performance, stuff like that, when I can say, okay, 4 years ago, I tested, some of the hardware is going to be the same. 4 years ago, I was testing i7 4790s with GTX 970s on occasion. They weren't as common as they are today, but I was testing that system occasionally. So you can go back and compare them. If I jaxed with the settings and said, okay, now we want to do it in 2K, that would really screw with it. So that's another reason why I do that. The other reason is that, and the biggest reason is that, by and large, this seems to be the same, the settings that people are actually gaming at. Based on the feedback I've gotten over the years, this seems to be what people want to see by and large. I know some people want to see something else, but for the most part, this is what people want to see. So let's jump into it. Always run it at full screen. I always run at 1080. I know some of you are running 2K, 4K, whatever, but 1080 is still kind of the standard for mid-level gaming, and most of what I deal with on my channel is mid-level gaming systems. So it is what it is. We leave the frame rate limiter off. Although I will mention, this seems to be a real point of contention with people. It was a real point of contention back when I first started doing this. Everybody had a gripe about this because I didn't usually mess with the default. I don't even know what it sets it at default. But if you've got a system that can only hit 60 FPS, like let's say you're running an i5 2500, an old second gen. Let's say an i5 2500, and you've got, say, a GTX 580 video card. I've seen that system hit 60 FPS, but that system's not going to go much above 60 FPS, maybe a little. So let's say you have that system set at 120 FPS. That system can't hit 120 FPS. It's going to be sitting at usually 60 to 80 FPS for a system like that. Having this frame rate limiter at 120 FPS, that's not what's if the person has a frame rate measurement up top and you see it's sitting at, say, 60 FPS, this 120 frame rate limit is not what's causing that. What's causing that is that the system can only hit what it can hit. So if you have a system that can hit a frame rate that is below the frame rate limit, that frame rate limit is not what's causing your system to hit the lower FPS. So please, for the love of all that is good, just the people that are obsessed with that, please stop. Obviously, the system that I'm using today can hit, high numbers. So we're gonna leave it turned off. I normally turn it off, but for those of you that obsess over this, just know that's that. So I don't usually mess with the brightness, contrast ratio, colorblind, none of that. So the way I normally do this, it becomes custom the moment you change anything from the default preset. So normally when I first set up a new system, the easiest way to do it, I go down to the low, and then I changed a couple of things I want. So we run at 100% 3D resolution. That means that it's the screen resolution is 1080 as we marked up here, and then the actual in-game rendering is at 1080 as well. Then I turn the view distance up to epic because by and large my understanding is most people trying to play competitively want epic view distance, which I like a wide field of view, so that's what I run as well. I don't mess with any of the other stuff. I leave it all at the defaults that the low preset pulls up. VSync is off. Motion blur is off. Not a fan of motion blur. I leave this off just because I use my own frame rate measurement tool on. We're using MSI Afterburner. I test on DX11. At some point, we may switch that over to DX12. Occasionally, I'll do a performance mode, but I've mentioned this before, but it may be getting better. I think I'm detecting generally that performance mode is improving, but it's just performance mode is really for if you need an extra boost because your system can't handle the game, and you still want to run at high frame rate. At least that's my opinion. Most of the systems that I'm testing now can hit 120, 144 FPS. So, you know, your i7 4790K, 16 gigs, GTX 970, 980, 1050 Ti, 1060, stuff like that. Those systems can all hit 120 FPS in Fortnite. So, the performance mode isn't as necessary on the systems I'm testing. I usually leave this on with the exception of very, very low-end systems, but I'm not really testing any of those systems anymore. By and large, the systems I'm dealing with now are all mid-range and up. I recently got a full-time job. I'm no longer doing this full-time. I used to build these systems full-time. And so now when we do testing, it's going to typically be on higher-end systems because I'm only going to be building, you know, upper mid-range and better. If you have a lower system, though, if you have like an i5 2500 with, say, like an old GTX 660, something like that, you may want to turn this off. I have noticed that this seems to result in some sort of some kinds of hinky performance, glitching, hitching, stuff like that on some lower end systems, particularly i5. I think it says rendering, but I think that this seems to run better on i7s with hyper-threading, at least high core count chips. So say 6 core or better, that kind of thing. I don't mess with this. I don't mess with this. I leave this on. This system has DLSS, but it's basically the only computer I use that has it, so we're going to leave that off. So the way I enable the settings, we hit apply. I strongly recommend closing the game and rebooting when you change the settings. You don't have to, but I find that sometimes there is definitely a noticeable change. That's particularly true when you go like DX11 to DX12 or you put performance mode on. I actually recommend 2 restarts for performance mode. It just seems to let the settings take a little bit better. You can tell me I'm crazy on that all you want, but it doesn't hurt anything to do it, so I recommend doing so. I generally do with my own systems. So let's pull this back up. There shouldn't really be... Sometimes it fluctuates on the opening screen, but I didn't really change anything. I already had the settings on that, so... and then, as far as any of this other stuff, I don't mess with any of this stuff. I don't actually... I mean, you see a lot of Fortnite videos here that I do, but Fortnite isn't... I'm like, right now, I'm deep into Assassin's Creed at the time this video was made. You know, Fortnite's... I don't hate it like I used to, but at the same time, it's not really my thing. And so I don't really get deep into it to the point where I need to mess with all of this stuff. I've had a few of my friends and cousins that have messed around with this. Maybe if there's anything that isn't default here, it's because they messed around with it. And they're always like, oh, I have this set of controls that you'll love, and it'll make your stuff so much better. And every time I try to use it, I hate it. I've gotten used to playing at the default settings. I'm perfectly happy. I'm not playing competitively. Just, I normally don't mess with the stuff. Never use a controller. Never mess with any of this. So anyway, hope that gives everybody an idea, because everyone's always asking, what's this setting? What's that setting? And I'm just going to start referring everybody to this video now. Paste a link to this video. This goes over all my settings. There it is. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope everybody finds this informative.